Uh, so hello everyone. Is it clear? Everyone hears me well? Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm Stephanie. I'm from the University of Liverpool, and I am here to discuss some of my findings of my PhD. And I will focus on methodology. I know this was a bit critiqued upon, but I think showing how we can use science and technology studies to approach problems in policy can, in my opinion, be very valuable. So to briefly situate where I started my research, so looking at how the UK basically responded to food animal antibiotic use as a public health risk. There's been a real focus on measurement of behavior. If we can quantify and qualify, we can manage. We can assess progress, and also if you look at sort of the latest data, cross-sector, we see a reduction, we see total use is reducing, we see critical important antibiotics also reducing, and sort of my interest is, what is the meaning of these statistics? Is this evidence of progress? Is this really showing that behavior is going better? Or, are other things happening maybe that we don't know of? And sort of the interrogation of numbers is situated in science and technology studies. STS, instead of seeing numbers as objective and neutral, what STS really tries to do is to explore how are numbers, how is evidence generated, and how is acted upon this evidence. It takes no position toward what is truth or right, it simply explores what people do. So this is also how I've approached my own research. So we start with a controversy, and in this case, food animal antibiotic use. So what are the claims? What are the different truth claims involved? What are the interests? And how is a consensus achieved? Between whom? And normally a consensus is achieved upon a certain evidence, and then what STS starts to do, it starts to trace, okay, what are the actions upon the evidence? What is the performativity also of, in this case, numbers? And also importantly, what are the intended and the unintended effects of taking a certain policy frame or accepting a certain scientific evidence for truth? So in a way, when I started my PhD, I was quite lucky, because from an STS point of view, because there was about to happen a big controversy. So we have the O'Neill expert committee, which was established, and they published a controversial report upon the misuse and overuse of antibiotics. And this was not very happily accepted by the agricultural industry. So lots of back and forth of claims, but nevertheless, in the end, a couple of months later, a consensus was achieved between policymakers, experts, and the agricultural industry in, okay, we need evidence basis, we need to measure, we need statistics, and they all agreed upon the following targets. So reduction targets, restrictions or bans on critical important antibiotics for humans, and transparency in use. And it was sort of agreed upon, okay, industry, if you can provide us these targets, you are able to keep control over antibiotics. And this is quite different from other countries such as the Netherlands or the Nordic countries, because there's much more legislation involved. So this is an interesting thing in itself. And I then there was a controversy and consensus, so what next? So that was sort of following also myself in the research field, as a researcher. I was not sure yet, shall I focus on the poultry or the pig, because they were the big users. And then sort of walking in the corridors of the veterinary faculty, people were saying to me, you know where you should look into in the dairy industry, because that is where very interesting practices are happening. So I sort of thought, okay, let's focus on the dairy industry. There was a high routine use, indeed, of antibiotics, especially in dry cow therapy. Now, for people who are not very familiar with this, so during the lactation cycle of a cow, every cow has a dry cow period, which means that that the cow is not milking, and it's sort of to let the udder restore. And the previous recommendations, guidelines, were to just treat every cow with antibiotics. But new evidence now suggests this is actually not necessary at all. So this is a big thing in the dairy dry cow therapy. And there was also a high critical important antibiotic use, as they were seen as the big guns. For me it was basically to then, okay, how is the UK dairy industry responding to the O'Neill recommendations? And before I continue, I briefly want to situate the dairy sector because it's essential to understand my next steps of reasoning. Because you have the dairy sector that involves lobby groups, the supply chains, the vets, but you also have the dairy supply chain in itself. And that means that you have dairy farmers, and dairy farmers, they are either contracted in a milk contract by milk processors or by retailers. And these two groups basically define how dairy farmers need to produce, under which quality standard farmers need to produce. And this is actually fragmenting the farmer landscape and also antibiotic policies, as I will argue later on. So moving back into the methodology, because at this point I had document, I had the O'Neill reports, consensus, but I still had to get into the field. So basically get mud on the boots, as one of the farmers said to me, you people should really go, listen more to what we have to say. So, and this is what I did. I also, importantly, I took a multi-sided ethnography approach. So I did not only focus on vets or on farmers, but I really interviewed the dairy supply chain, so all the different groups that were basically busy with building policies. And this is where the data then started to come. I will skip that slide. So going into the data, what I then found, so I discussed with you the retailers, the milk processors. Now looking at the retailers first, so the left column, they are on, so roughly 20-25% in the UK is on a retailer-aligned milk contract. And for these retailers, these are not the retailers such as Lidl or Aldi, but these are the ones with the high customer profile. So they want high quality, and what they have, by offering farmers a fixed milk contract, they create a certain quality. And as such, also for them, it is really important is that they keep their customers. So for them, transparency, brand protection, brand promotion is a big deal. And what they will tell to their farmers is, if you look at the focus of their dairy antibiotic policies, it's very interesting. They really focus on recording, on CIA restriction, and on herd health planning as making it part from the sustainable image. So their focus is really on actually on gathering, on providing this data to the consumers and the public. But if we look at the milk processors, so they are actually responsible for the rest of the farmers, so for the majority of the farmers. They offer a volatile milk price, so less economic security. And there is a sort of big skeleton in the closet as they are dealing with milk residues. Now, what are milk residues? So if you use an antibiotic in an animal, it can take a certain amount of time before the antibiotic is out of the system and is out of the milk. And apparently milk processors are having a big problem with this because they are able to control themselves when they have the milk, but as farmers are able in the UK to administer antibiotics themselves, farmers are actually in control of deciding at the moment when is the milk safe or when is the milk not safe. So milk processors are really struggling with this control, and they have the regulatory bodies breathing in their necks. So it's interesting if you see the focus of their policies. I'm not saying that they're not interested in critical important antibiotics, but their focus is really on training farmers on that particular decision-making moment. When is the milk safe or not? They don't really necessarily, and this is maybe, I need to be careful about saying this, but they will not really invest too much in the herd health planning, everything around it. They will focus on the farmer. So you see actually two different focuses of policy. And if we then look at sort of what the farmers are actually doing, so what is actually the practices of these policies. So looking at the retailers, so yes, they can provide transparency. They're creating their elite group of farmers. But the unintended consequences is speaking with farmers, with vets. Farmers are in a way afraid to lose their milk contract of the retailer because it is a good milk contract. They sort of use the standards as tick boxing. There are control systems in place, but still, yeah, it's a bit debatable, and you see that there are really hidden antibiotic practices going on. So farmers having multiple milk contracts, secret boxes of critical important antibiotics, double dosing. I'm not saying that every farmer is doing this, don't get me wrong, but these are things that are happening because farmers are just basically able to administer the antibiotics themselves. And if we look at the milk processors, so the intended consequences, they can show, look, we are training our farmers, we have programs in place, we are building towards, safe milk. But we see that sort of because of pushing farmers to use self-tests, antibiotic self-tests, what farmers are now trying to, they use it as a bit of a fruit machine. So instead of not using antibiotics, it's sort of, okay, when is the milk safe or when is the milk not safe? So instead of really this more preventative approach, it's more of a reactive policy. And also, another big issue is the disposal of milk waste in the slurries. So in a way, it's not coming in the food chain directly, but it's now being disposed in the environment. We can ask questions, what does that do? So these two groups or chains basically are not only fragmenting farmers' way of farming, but does it maybe lead to different AMR ecologies? What are the public health risks? So different practices of what the numbers are actually showing us. Now, and there is still one other player in the market. So there are the food processors, the milk processors, the retailers, and there is also Red Tractor. Now, next time if you go to the supermarket, look for this logo. So 98% of the people, of the British dairy farmers, are farm assured with Red Tractor. So they also define the food quality, the milk quality and milk safety standards under which farmers need to produce. Importantly, it's run and funded by the industry, so the independency is debatable. As they only have recently implemented new antibiotic standards, I have not been able to explore this during my field work. But what I have encountered, asking people about what do you think of Red Tractor, what is it, and farmers, vets were saying, we really don't value it. It's a tick box exercise, it's a paper reality, it fits really the sort of the black box idea, Red Tractor. It's presented as food safety, but actually if you open the black box up, you see that, you see different practices than the papers tell us. So sort of the latest data, now I don't want to be, it seems like I'm very critical, but it's not, I don't want to be critical, but just show what is happening. So sort of there is progress, so critical important antibiotics are reduced, there's a total reduction, we have data coverage. So the last conference, everyone was very happy, we're making progress. But it's sort of the conclusion is that, the statistics are a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You put a policy frame in place, people will design the structures to actually accomplish these targets, but they will also still continue with their own agendas, with their own interests, if you're not aware of what matters to them. And this is not making a judgment, but these people are dealing with markets, with brand protection, with milk contracts, and these are all these non-human actors which are actually driving policies behind the scenes as well, and the practices upon these policies. So for me, my recommendations, if we do want to keep this voluntary industry-led approach, we should be just more critical. It's easy said than done. It's maybe easy said, but I think we should, also look in things such as, it's not just a behavioral exercise. There's really a focus in the UK on behavior, and I think we should, first of all, try to understand, okay, if farmers have such accessibility to antibiotics, they use this as a power mechanism to influence vets. I've spoken to a lot of vets who say, we can't change our business models because if I don't give the farmer an antibiotic, I'll just go to the vet down the road and he will give it to me. So this is really, these are things we should think about because this drives, this just drives other practices that that are happening, but that the public is not aware of, basically. So And I see also more of a role maybe for the government to take up certain roles and leads and establish an independent authority who could maybe collect data. So yeah, I mean, there are opportunities, I would say. So thank you for listening.